This is a little video I would really like to title, "It's the debt, stupid." Not the Brexit, not anything else. It's the debt. The crushing debt. So again, if we have a Brexit vote and they decide that, we're leaving and it's a done deal, UK, we're leaving the European Union, they have, as I've said, my opinion, they have a very easy finger to point right over there. Oh, you citizens, we warned you not to do this. We told you it would cause chaos in the markets, and it is doing it. You're at fault. Real easy for them to say that. None of them, while pointing that finger, are going to say, hey, Global Research Institute, Canada's company, a Canadian company, Global Risk Institute. It's Alice in Wonderland world. Global Risk Institute warns, debt is being piled upon debt, being piled upon debt. Oh, well, hold on. No, I don't. That doesn't make sense to me because, we had 9 trillion in 2008, and that quickly turned to 11 and 12 and 14 trillion, then 16 trillion, then 18 trillion. Now we're at 19 trillion. The freaking president's still not even out of office. It's more than... Can you imagine being a sitting president and the debt your country has more than doubles since you've taken office? No matter what the debt is. No matter what the amount is. Whether it was 1 trillion and it went to 2. Well, that's not that big. It's only 2 trillion. Or it's 8 trillion and goes past 18 to 19 trillion. Well, hold on. 8 and 9 trillion was pretty big to begin with. And it doubled? How long did it take us to get to the 8 and 9 trillion? I'm glad you asked. Since our country was founded, which I'll round off, approximately 240 years ago, it took all those years, nearly 200 years, to accumulate $1 trillion in debt, most of which was accumulated from 60-something to 1980. But nonetheless, 200 years, $1 trillion in debt. The debt ceiling nonsense. And then from there, Reagan, of course, comes in. Papa Bush comes in. Clinton comes in. Bush Jr. comes in. 1 trillion turns to 3 trillion, turns to 5 trillion, turns to 6 trillion. He leaves office. 8, 9 trillion approximately. Obama takes over, right? So $1 trillion it took 200 years to reach. From 9 trillion, well, let me back up just to go through this little, imaginary chart, if you will, in order. From 1980 to the year 2010, we're going to round off. Instead of 2008, we're going to round off to 2010 for easy, enjoyable math. 1980, 1990, 2000, 2010. Approximately 30 years, again, the 2 different years, 28 years later. We take that $1 trillion in debt, turn it into 6, and then 9 trillion. So think about that. 200 years to get 1 trillion, 28 years approximately to get to 9 trillion, but we were already at 1, so that's 8 more trillion, okay? So 8 more trillion is tacked on in a span of 28 years. But when looking back to 200 years, holy crap, that's impressive, and not in a good way impressive. Only to be outdone by 2008. Well, again, 2010, I said 28 years. That's accurate. 2008 to now 2016. 8 years later. 8, not 28, not 200. 8 years later, we've taken 9 trillion and turned it into 19. Technically 8, 9, whatever. 9 trillion turns to 18. 9 plus 9 is 18. So it has doubled, but it's not 18. It's now 19 trillion. And God knows where it's going to be by January of next year. It might be at 20. This is an 8-year period. So we've gone from this huge 200-year period to get this, massive $1 trillion in debt. to a 28-year period to get $8 more trillion in debt, to this little teeny tiny 8-year period to outdo the whole 228 years previously. Again, in eight years. This is so unsustainable. You can't point it's the Brexit vote, it's the millennials, it's the handout debit EBT, it's the... How come no one's saying it's the $1 trillion wars? It's the massive government spending on their buddies in the military industrial complex, in the pharmaceutical industrial complex, in the healthcare industrial complex, and everything else. Everything else except normal jobs that you who are watching this video right now are part of. You guys, we don't count, apparently. We don't count on that. We're not part of the club. As George Carlson said, it's a big effing club, and you ain't in it. So the issue is debt piling on top of debt, piling on top of debt. So no matter what you hear when they pull the trigger on the global economy, and when they start pointing fingers and this happened, this is the cause. And all these politicians, all these years, have been doing this and doing this and doing this without a care in the world until there needs to be a care. And that's coming soon. This man says, from the Canada's Global Risk Institute, these low interest rates could have the potential to be the next serious issue faced by countries, and it's because debt is exploding everywhere. Richard Nesbitt, 60, chief executive officer of the group the group that researches risk to the financial industry, said Monday in an interview in Bloomberg's Toronto bureau. There's debt being piled upon debt, he said. Since the middle of 2015, central bank balance sheet expansion has once again led to a collapse of sovereign bond yields, further encouraging global corporate debt to surge. But we also have government debt surging. And then we have corporate debt surging. Let's take a little look at this page on Zero Hedge, shall we? All right, so the green line here, we've got global developed sovereign bond yield from 2011. It's up here, coming down, 2012, 13, 14, 15, 16, just plummeting. And then we have, in the red, global central bank balance sheet. Way down here, 2011, which technically is about 2010 almost. Surging. We get to about 2014 and a half, which actually, no, just past 2015. And we have a, instead of a kind of a, line like this, it's more like this and going up to the tune of trillions of dollars. As the majors plunge into negative rates, Japan, German, Swiss, global debt has climbed to about 37% since the 2008 financial crisis, Nesbitt said. Global debt has climbed 37% since the 2008 financial crisis. Shouldn't that be reversing since we had a recession then? The official story, I'll say it for the 400th time, April 2009, the official accepted date of the end of the recession, which would mean somewhere on or about, plus or minus a little bit of time, debt should have went the other way. Global debt should have went the other way instead of going up. But then again, that would mean everything that I've been telling you over the years is a lie, and everything the government has been telling you over the years is the truth. But today's opposite day. I've been telling you the truth, and the government has been lying through its teeth the entire time with the help of the complicit mainstream media. So he says it's climbed about 37% since the 2008 financial crisis, as central banks around the world have pushed interest rates down to stoke growth, and even below zero in the case of Japan and some of Europe's central banks. Enticed by record low interest rates, companies increased total debt by $2.81 trillion over the past 5 years to a record, by the way, $6.64 trillion. In 2015 alone, liabilities jumped by $850 billion, 50 times the increase in cash by S&P's reckoning. So that to me says it's 50 times what their assets really are, because they always cook the books to make their assets look like they're better or higher than the liabilities. Naturally, that's what you want. You want your assets up here, liabilities down here. But I'm here to tell you the freaking truth, because they cook their books, but you're not going to see it yet, but it will come out. It's the opposite. Liabilities way up here, assets way down here. They did this in 2008. The assets that were up here, a lot of mortgage-backed securities failing, foreclosures. We're not even collecting on any of them. Federal Reserve, will you please buy all of these junky, garbage, non-performing loans from us? Yes. Oh, one more request. Go ahead. Will you give us 100% value? No moron in the world would do that when an asset is completely garbage. But yes, because we're both part of the same club. So now your balance sheet can look like this. You ever heard the term, you can't polish a turd? Boy, are they trying. As Societe Generale showed last year, all the newly created debt in the 21st century, which again, we're only 16 years into this century, has gone for just one thing: to fund stock buybacks. That's it. Which, as Nesbitt claims via Bloomberg, quote, that is Alice in Wonderland world. And if you go into negative interest rates, you are going through the looking glass and no one knows what will really happen, he said. The fact that Europeans and Japanese policymakers have pursued negative interest rates should be a signal to people that things are very wrong, he said, who was formerly head of capital markets business at Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce. Europeans do not seem to have a way out, in my view, so it's quite a broken situation, he said. Oh, but wait a minute, the Brexit vote will happen. And if it exits the EU, then they'll just point the finger at the people of the UK. You caused this. But I don't think for 1 second the people of the UK, or anywhere for that matter, are going to buy that horse shit, should that be used as an excuse for the collapsing economies. Which, again, is on schedule for later this year, September, October timeframe. Possibly a little later, according to Lindsey Williams. No later than the first part of next year, he was told. Remains to be seen. And I will be watching. Raising rates brings its own problems, including a cascading effect of people being unable to meet bloated debt payments. And I'm going to give you a perfect example, because I always use this example, not too much on YouTube, but I use it friends and family. But I have said it on YouTube, and here it is. Let's say you know a guy, great credit and all, whatever, has a certain job, income, not late on his bills, just an average hard-working American. His name is JSNIP4. And this guy, JSNIP4, goes and gets a loan on a house because the rates are great. Got a house for 3.5%, baby. Yeah. Now all of a sudden, old JSNIP4, a number of years later, housing prices have gone up. And I'm not even talking crazy 2005, 2006 stuff. Just generally, housing prices have gone up. He's got some equity in his house 5-6 years later. He wants to sell it. Interest rates are rising. Now the average rate is 5 to 6%. Whatever my monthly payment was, and this isn't going to be the exact math, but I'm just going to, just for example purposes, follow me. Old J Snip 4 is paying $1,500 a month on his mortgage at 3.5%. He now wants to sell his house, but the lowest rate available to the best, highest, awesomest credit person out there is 5.5%. Okay? 3.5% to 5.5%, 2 more percent difference. And all of a sudden, for the new person, again, this math isn't perfect, so just bear with me. 15% turns into $1,500 a month turns into $1,700 a month to buy the same exact house that I have. Problem, because the interest rates rise, the house values, period, across the board, have to come down because the people who can afford the house can still only afford $1,500 a month. So I can't pay $1,700. I can only afford $1,500. And just a few years ago, this house was affordable to me because it was $1,500 a month based on my calculations. But now the interest rates are 5.5%, and that's the best I can get. Some people are paying 6.5. I am awesome. I'm getting it for 5.5 because I'm a member of Bozo so-and-so credit union, and I get a special rate. But I can't afford $1,700, so it doesn't matter. What has to happen? The value of said item has to come down to meet this thing called an equilibrium. And the equilibrium is interest rates over here, house price over here, and your monthly payment in the middle. And right now, you got a lot of house for a tiny bit of interest rate. And now, interest rates are rising. If this house rate even stays the same, as far as what the house is worth, in other words, you bought it for $200,000, you're selling it for $200,000. They can't afford it because their monthly payment says so, because of the interest rates. So that's a whole nother problem. And because of that is why housing crash 2.0 is going to be right around the corner. Because ultimately, when they let loose on this, they will be bringing rates back up to some normal level, which will cause values of all kinds of stuff to come back down. Raising rates brings its own problems, including a cascading effect of people being unable to meet bloated debt payments. And that's exactly what I just described. The only way out, which is the most likely outcome, is leadership from the U.S., he said. We start to see the Federal Reserve in the United States start to raise interest rates, and other economies such as Canada and Australia that can do it will follow. So normally raising rates helps the pension system, helps the economy, so to speak, helps pensioners, savers. So that's a good thing. However, raising interest rates also affect housing, like I just gave you that example. So while over here the pensions might do a little better and some other things, housing is going to collapse. So is everything else that you get a loan on. So my question is, what about car loans? Are they going to come crashing down too? Because it seems like the car loans is an industry in and of itself when it comes to loans, because you can, I've got a 1.7% interest rate. That's unheard of, right? Not really even with cars anymore. And I think it's simply because the car dealers say, well, we're selling this damn car for $50,000. And by next year, even with very, very low miles, it's going to be worth $25,000, $28,000 maybe. Where the hell did that $25,000 or $20,000 go? They jacked it up so high so that they can get their money with practically no interest. Who cares about the no interest? We got this huge bonus check from you when you bought the car. That's a little bit different than housing. And at the same time, houses aren't $50,000 like a car. A decent car, I should say. And I'll tell you right now, I don't think I'll ever spend that kind of money on a freaking car. I don't care how wealthy I become, should I become wealthy. I just don't see myself doing that. But it's going to cause housing crash 2.0. I think the Goldilocks just right scenario is one where central banks can begin to raise interest rates on a slow, systematic basis over a period of many years, and the economy is able to absorb that. I would actually agree with that. If they were to slowly, little teeny tiny, 6 months, a year and a half later, another teeny tiny little raise. As he says, the economy could absorb that. You wouldn't have this drastic dropping in housing prices and all this craziness. I can't afford it. Because it's going to happen at a little teeny tiny minute scale. Which also means if you drag it out for years and years and years and years, what about those pensioners and savers and everything else again? You're still screwing those people. So as he said previously, I don't think there's a way out of this. Except to reset the whole damn system. And since last year was the 47, the 7 times 7, whatever, Shemitah cycle, the big one supposedly, and it started then and ends this year with supposedly debt jubilee, you don't think the club is going to give itself a massive debt destruction jubilee, do you? Wipe it all out, and in the process wipe out what you have, not necessarily wipe it out where you don't own it, owe on it, but wipe it out as in the value of it, you're screwed. Theirs, on the other hand, it'll be written off somehow. They don't have to worry about it. You, who still may owe on a car, you still may owe on a house, you will still owe that. The debt jubilee is not for you. Why? Because it's a big freaking club, and you ain't in it.